have a question about your cunt that you were too embarrassed to pose? Like, if I don't have sex for the next 8 years, will my pussy hole close? Well, buckle up, school's in session. These sex pros have planned a lesson, cause cunts aren't just for reproduction. Whether you were born with it or it's under construction, open your ears, cause the Clam Jam's got you covered. The Clam Jam.
Hello and welcome to the Clam Jam. Happy Thursday, I guess, if that's a thing. I'm Vienna. I'm the consultant. I'm your host on the Consultant Clam Jam, where we talk about things that have to do with vaginas and are adjacent to vaginas. And we talk with fellow consultants about all kinds of things, again, vagina related and adjacent. Today, we have a fabulous guest. As always, we have a fabulous guest, but like an extra fabulous one, Tamica Wilder of the Orgasmic Mama. So we are going to be chatting a little bit about sexuality and motherhood, which I don't know if you've ever existed in a culture, but typically nowadays, being a mother and being a sexual being are sometimes seen as mutually exclusive and definitely seen as challenging. But what I love about Tamica and her work is that she really focuses on how being a sexual being is not something that you can coexist with being a mother. You don't have to be one or the other. And in fact, tapping into your sexuality, continuing to engage your sexuality makes you a better mother, because it usually makes you a better human too, right? Like having a fully formed self. So we're going to be chatting about all that and more today. I'm going to bring Tamica on now and let her intro herself to you a little bit as well. Welcome, Tamica. Thank you for being here.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Yes. Tamica Wilder.
Tamica, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. No, that's all right. And yeah, the Orgasmic Mama is like my name also. And so depending on kind of who I'm talking to, I use different names, which is awesome fun. Yeah, so I'm a somatic sexologist. I live in Melbourne, Australia, actually, which is a beautiful part of the world. And just like V has said, I am crazed about all things sexuality, motherhood, and really my jam is about handing out big fat permission slips to whoever needs them, whoever, feels like maybe they're hiding a little bit in the shadows or being kind of really held back by conditioning that says that we're not allowed to be sexual, or, stories from the past that try and rob you of your joy. Really about helping you unpick old narratives and step forward and lean more bravely and boldly and powerfully into your sexuality, no matter who you are.
Which I think, again, like it applies to everybody. It's not just mothers at all, but we're all, I think, we're all there. We all need to like work on our sexuality and our sexual selves because, again, generally speaking, I'm in the US and you're in Australia and we have different cultures, but the sex negativity does seem to like run throughout a little bit.
Totally. Absolutely. Yeah. So, I always get kind of jealous of people maybe living in Europe or places that we perceive to be maybe a little bit more liberal. Mm-hmm. And I would love for our cultures to catch up.
I do have this idea, though, of Australia, which I don't think is totally correct, of that you are a little bit more sexually progressive than the United States. And maybe I'm wrong, but like with things like having to do with sex work and somatic body work and things like that, it definitely seems to be an edge that you're more interested in exploring than like our puritanical little US selves are still like terrified about.
Yeah, you're probably right about that. I think some of our laws are actually more progressive, but in terms of the culture and the people, like the everyday narrative, that is still catching up. But at least we have some of the structures to help professionals like you and I actually, get in there and start giving new messages.
So do you feel like being a sexuality educator, there is like, does it feel very taboo still in Australia? Or do you feel like there is like a little bit, it's hard to compare, right? Like we live in different places. But does it feel a little like it's still in the US feels like, wow, crazy, people talking about sex, less so now. And especially like being a younger generation, but can you say it at a party without people like getting weird?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so yes, it is still taboo, and I think potentially because of who I work with most and my narrative around families and motherhood and sex positive families. That's like, oh wow, people are like, oh, I've been thinking about sex for myself, but gosh, like it's overwhelming starting to think about, what do you mean I'm supposed to now start talking to my daughter about masturbation? Like, Tamica, just calm down. So yes, there are taboos there. However, when I'm at a party or when I'm wherever, there's definitely no part of me that needs to change, what I say about what I do. Like, it's very, I'm very forthright, and people are like, okay, great. Very good.
Well, I think like the way that you approach it is so like friendly and fun in a lot of ways. Like you're definitely, I like your Instagram because you're always like, listen, here's what we're doing, but not in a way where it's like scary. Not that any of this is scary. I mean, it can be scary, but
yeah,
you come to it with this whole very playful energy, which I love. So I'm curious, how did you get here? So did you start this kind of work after becoming a mom, or was it something that was already part of who you were and it further developed and changed with motherhood? Or
yeah, probably that second one. It's always really been quite upfront for me in my life. I've always been obsessed with working with taboos, getting under the skin of an issue, getting right to the core of like the human condition, and looking beyond kind of what we see on the outside, and we're like, yeah, but what do you mean by that? And what's under that? And let's go deeper with that. And I think sexuality, our bodies, that's inherently kind of part of that dig deeper. But I got even more obsessed with it and even more, training and really tilted my entire focus to it after I became a mother. And I think that that's because motherhood really brought me into my body in ways that nothing else did. As someone who has been the victim of abuse in my early teen years, I got very good at disassociating from my body, opting out of sensations, and really turning off my somatic intelligence. And so motherhood, carrying a baby, being very primal, having to take care of my body in different ways, and then things like breastfeeding and eating my placenta and all sorts of like really body-based stuff that comes with motherhood really brought me back in and landed and grounded me. And I was like, well, I've got a choice. I can either be a mom that's like, oh, well, this is me now, and I have a few babies, so I'm not particularly sexual, and my hormones are just as they are, and I feel a little bit more crazy than usual, a bit more stressed than usual, and I'm just going to be this person. Or I can really take control and activate my sexuality and heal my pelvis and take care of my womb and, allow sex to thrive in motherhood. And so that's what I did.
And so how did you do that? Because it doesn't sound like an easy thing to undertake.
Yeah, I did that, I reckon, by firstly just not, by continuing to choose it. I was like, it's not something that's going to accidentally happen. It's not going to tap me on the shoulder and be like, hey, turn around, look at me. I have to go and actually go, all right, I'm making the choice to do this. And so that meant, doing some different trainings around embodiment and tantra and breath work, and it meant learning, being like in somatic therapy, so learning how to actually soothe and heal my nervous system and take care of stress in different ways that I didn't know before that. It took me going to the osteo and the physio and taking care of my pelvic floor and actually learning about my cunt, learning about how things operate, and getting obsessed with what feels good for you, Tamica. What is good? What is joy? What is alive? And then just lining up with that more and more often than apathy or fatigue or, oh, I don't know, or like, oh, I can't, or, oh, it's so hard, or my husband this, or my boyfriend that, or my partner this. And so, really peeling away from the victim that can actually come through at times when our body's going through changes, like, so much changes in the body when you have a baby. The answer to that is the first thing I did is just focus the lens on what I wanted to do and who I wanted to be in my body, and then not listen to much else.
Yeah, I think that's extremely powerful, and probably like powerful for anything you want to undertake, right? It's like, this is a thing that I'd like to you're basically prioritizing, right? Like, I am prioritizing my sexuality, especially at a time where, like, you know, there's a lot of narratives, and also your body is like doing a lot of stuff for other people, right? Like, you're breastfeeding, you're trying to keep this tiny baby alive, you're trying to keep 2 tiny babies alive, you know, and that is, I mean, that's quite a choice to undertake at that moment, because again, the narrative, and I'm saying I love that you did this, but the narrative is so tough, I would say, because it says, like, at this point, you should be doing everything to support this life. Like, you really shouldn't be taking care of yourself, which is what we're given, but it's also incorrect. So I'm curious about that a little bit more. So like I can see a way to it, but I'm just interested in hearing more about, what did it take for you to prioritize that? And then, did you have pushback from people in your life? Was your partner and partners, were they supportive? Or was it just like out of you, and you're like, I don't really care about these narratives. This is extremely important to who I am.
Yeah. I guess there's a couple of things that come through with that. I think, firstly, understanding that prioritizing our sexual nature when we have children doesn't always look like having sex.
Okay, great.
Right? So it's like, prioritizing my sexual nature as a mum could be prioritizing making sure that I come upstairs and close the door and lay on my bed and hug myself for 20 minutes. Right? That doesn't take some big declaration of like, now I need to go and have lots of sex. Right? It's very different to what it might look when you think about prioritizing your sexual nature. Knowing that, the more calm and content and taken care of I could feel, the more available then I would be to things like pleasure and arousal, and if I so chose, sex with myself or a partner.
Got it.
So like peeling back what it means to be taking care of your sex as a mother. Does that make sense to you?
Totally makes sense. Yeah. So that part of your body care, like the idea of like expanding what sex means.
Yes, exactly. And then, it also sometimes does mean disappointing people. It also sometimes does mean, actually, I'm 3 or 6 months postpartum. I don't feel like having penetrative sex, actually. So many mothers are like, oh my God, I've got to get back to it. It's been 6 months. Oh my God, like my husband's going crazy, or my partner's really getting really edgy. It's been 7 months. And I'm like, and what? You've just birthed a baby. So it's like sexual reclamation, actually, not like, oh, I got to get back to it and like, let's make you sexually active as quick as possible after having a baby. No, it's about continuing to learn the needs of your body and the sexual needs of your body and the pleasure and arousal needs and the hormonal needs and the pelvic floor needs of your body after having a baby. So yes, sometimes people are disappointed when you have to set a boundary or you have to choose different activities for yourself for a while. And yes, the main priority is always going to be the baby. Like, this is one big kind of pain point for, I think, a lot of people who are in partnership with someone who has a baby. It's like you go from equal or even like, you know, top ranked. As soon as ever there's a baby there, it's like mama, baby, and you never ever rank as high as that other life.
I think that's such an interesting point, just to jump in on that, because I think it's great. I think that you've said like some amazing things, as always, and this idea of like, one, expanding sex, and two, also realizing that sex might be different because your body, you just transformed. Like, you know, pregnancy, birth, they're very transformational processes. And then the other aspect of like how that changed your dynamic with your partner and being prepared for that. So I don't have children myself, but my partner does have a son. And you know, he's a wonderful child and he's a wonderful father, but there is a difference in the relationship of going from like, it's not 2 of us, it's like 3. There's always going to be someone that he has to care about more than me because he does, and he's a father and as he should. But there is like a total power shift that happens, or maybe not power shift, but like relationship dynamic. And when you go from being a couple and then there's 3 of you, and partners often feel, the non-birthing parent, the father or whoever didn't give birth, feels a little bit excluded from this new relationship. And I wonder, knowing your background of having like being polyamorous and having multiple partners, I don't know if you did that prior to having children, but if you did do it prior to having children, was that skill set helpful once you had babies?
Yeah, I didn't do it prior to having, well, not as deep as we are now, but like we were always open. So, kind of, but more physically, not relationally. Yeah, I think that there is magic in learning how to communicate compassionately, clearly, kindly, calmly, because I think that's a huge skill that's going to help a new family or a mum and a partner navigate the next phase in your sexual expression and your sexual relationship. Actually, coming into motherhood really brought my nurturer in, like deep nurture, a lot more soft, a lot more gentle, a lot less focused on that kind of at least for the beginning, that kind of crazy, like animalistic, wild, raw kind of like fucky energy that can come, in our younger years or in our maiden kind of ship. So communicating, oh, wow, there's this softness, there's this emotion, there's this whole other realm of sexual expression that I would love to explore, actually. Would you be up for that? Are you around for that? How can we do a bit more of that? That's like one thing, but not communicating that, or just being like, oh my God, I don't know, I've changed so much. I don't even feel attracted to them in the same way. Like, what's wrong with me? Oh my God, I'm not sexual anymore. These are the narratives that we have, instead of, oh, actually something's changed. What communication skills can I use to lean in and let my partner know? And then we can co-create something new and profound based on who we are now.
I love that. And again, super applicable to all kinds of things, right? Like our sexual needs and desires change throughout our lives, throughout long-term partnership, right? And people get attached to the narrative that says like, oh, something has changed, so therefore something is wrong, or something is bad, or like I liked or it's grief potentially too. Like I really liked what we had and now we have something different and I want what we had, but it's, you've kind of closed the door to what could be. So it's like, okay, well, what I had is really great. So can I have something great again? Like that fear. So, and I'm sure that's something that comes up with your clients all the time. So how do you like help people get into like the juiciness of the unknown?
Yeah, sure. Well, that's the thing that happens all the time. I want to go back to the way it was. You're never going back. None of what we ever do is about going back. It's about creating what is next and moving forward with curiosity. I think firstly, really, it is about looking at the dynamic inside of the relationship. So usually I try and help them find points where there is incongruence or where there's gaps in communication or where they, one of them is starting to feel quite unsafe or unheld. And so it's about addressing that first, because there's no version of moving into the unknown that feels safe if the other person's not on board, And I know that kind of does focus on the relational element, but I think that potentially, people who are becoming mothers potentially likely have partners, and there's a whole bunch of people that don't have partners as well. So that's the first thing, like looking at the relational dynamic and like, can you feel safe to move forward into the unknown? We look at that. And then we work on like, what are your ideals? So ideally, what kind of sexuality do you want to create inside of your body, inside of your psyche, inside of the environment around you? Being intentional with like what you want to create around that is something that most people have not given time to. So sometimes we create an avatar, or we create like a version of self that is just kind of over there and a little bit separate, and we speak about who that person is. You know, how does she walk? How does she talk? What does she look like? What does she eat? What does she wear? What's her favorite color? What are their favorite, you know, smells of oils and all sorts of things where it's like, oh my gosh, if I really could have anything that I wanted inside of my sexual landscape, I would create this, and this. And sometimes putting it outside of us makes it like easier to see or imagine, because we don't imagine ourselves yet as the people that we want to become, you know? So we got to get some distance. So that's another thing we do.
I really like that. Yeah, it's very, very intentional. And to your point, kind of just, you know, I think especially with heterosexual relationships where it's kind of like the narrative default, or heterosexual monogamous relationships, right? It's like, that's what we're taught, is like, that's what we should have. And there's a script that's presented to you and you kind of just like roll on with it because you're like, I don't know, no one's giving me any other ideas, or like, I'm just doing what I think I should be doing or what has been modeled. And that's like a place where like queer people will often talk about like the straight people really hard, like in this box. And if you have a non-traditional relationship arrangement, or you have, you know, any kind of like queer relationship, you got a lot more space to plan because you have to create it as you go. Yes. And that's what that made me think of.
Totally. Yeah.
It's so like you can create, and that doesn't make it phony or put on, because it's coming out of you and what you actually want, but you're speaking to that desire.
That's right. That's right. And it's like quite brave to speak something else into creation, especially when we are given so much modeling around like, this is what a perfect family looks like, and this is what a lovely house looks like, and this is what you should be doing, you heterosexual monogamous people, like, do that. And then when we're like, oh my God, I don't want that. Am I broken? Is there something wrong with me? Am I going to ruin my children? Like, all of this stuff. No, you're not broken. There's nothing wrong with you. You're not ruining anyone by actually curating a life experience that you deeply subscribe to, instead of one that you feel like you should. That's how we get into trouble when we turn like 40, 50, and it's like, actually, my whole life has been a lie. I need a divorce. Oh, look at that. You've had 9 affairs. Oh, look at that. Like, I've been wildly unhappy for the last decade. Like, create now. What do you want it to be like?
So what would you say if someone is like listening to you speak right now and being like, ooh, you're like touching on I'm feeling things. How do we start? How do you start if you suspect like you suspect I'm unhappy, you suspect that, you know, there's something lacking in your sex life, but potentially in other places as well?
Yeah.
Where's the starting point? Because I imagine it can feel very overwhelming.
Totally. The starting point is to get it out of you, out of your mind, out of thoughts, out of like the rat wheel of discontent up here. Write it down, record some voice memos, start expressing what could be there for you. I do feel like people who are holding on to these types of things probably haven't said it to many people. Or maybe there's like a best friend that you've been uttering a few things to, but just get it out first before sharing it with your partner or whatever. And also, like, if you don't already, get some counseling or some support, some external support. Usually we attach something like counseling or psychology with, oh, there's something wrong with me, or I've got severe anxiety, or I'm depressed, or I'm going through this big fat issue. But imagine if you just like grabbed it before getting to that point, and you're like, wow, there's some stuff coming up. I've written all about it. I don't want to hold on to this on my own. Go and seek support.
Easy as that, truly.
Like, to begin with, you don't want to take a big bag of like ungrounded and unformed kind of thoughts or high level ideas of panic and fear and, oh my God, and just dump it in front of, you know, somebody in your relationship. Probably first get some of your clarity and
or work with someone like you. And that is like you do one-on-one work with people, and then also with couples, or
I do one-on-one, couples, and groups. So if people are in a group dynamic, you know, poly groups, then work with them too. It's the best.
And especially like, I mean, that's a whole other thing too. If you're in a relationship that has more than 2 people, and then perhaps you become a mother, or just something changes. There's a lot of feelings at play. There's a lot of dynamics where people are like, there's just the extra going on.
So much.
Yeah. What is that? What does counseling 3 or more look like?
It's really usually about helping groups come up with tools to create more powerful systems for conversation. So like conversation systems. So we don't know necessarily how to have conversations where everyone feels heard, everyone feels safe, everyone gets a go. We're not trying to fix or change or heal everyone, and people aren't taking too much responsibility for each other, but people are also taking responsibility for the parts that are theirs. Like there's a lot of pieces that real conscious conversations need, actually, and so people don't know how to do that. So it's about usually teaching that.
That's big stuff. It's like, and it's so funny, like everything you're saying, I'm like, yeah, and that applies to literally anything else in your life. That applies to family dynamics. That applies to workplace dynamics. Like you'd have a different conversation, right? Like appropriate things in different places, but same skills, right? Like how do you build and maintain relationship knowing that everyone is changing constantly, yourself included?
Yeah.
So how do we be okay with change?
Yes, and also be okay with, when our wounding and when our, I guess it's just wounding. The soft parts and the ouchy parts and the vulnerable parts are coming forward. There's that element too. It's like it's big stuff when we journey with more than one person, and it often creates. You have to evolve, and you heal pain, and you start seeing yourself and the world and life like differently when you can take responsibility for taking care of yourself and not expecting others and your relationships to be band-aids.
Right. Yeah. I've always said like poly relationships or open relationships or ethical open relationships are like relationship grad school. It's like, okay, you want to like get really deep into like your own dynamics and other people's dynamics. Like it's not usually about like, now we're having orgies and it's great. Although it could be, but usually it's like, and now I'm addressing my inner childhood pain and like all my dynamics that I had with like partners before, or like dynamics with my parents. It's just like, it's like, it's a real, it can be very sexy, but it's a lot of like inspection, personal work as well.
Totally. It's a lot of personal work. And so the dark and the ouch and the hard feels real dark and ouch and hard. But then oh my God, this is so awesome. Like, yes, we're doing this. This kicks ass. We just had an amazing day. And that all feels like super cool. Like the highs are highs and the lows are lows.
Yeah. But then like you're kind of throwing sex in there as well, and like sex is like the carrot, right? Not that we should be doing carrot and stick, but like you're like, well, I get if I do this work on myself, I get more of the fun sex. Like it's hopefully like,
right? And just the support and the all of the cool stuff that comes with like great relationships.
Yeah. Oof, it's good stuff. I love that. So I'm curious, I want to like go to another group dynamics, which is like sex positive families. So knowing that you are a mom and you're also like teaching sex positivity and having these journeys with yourself as well, building sex positive families is really important. So, and something that freaks people out, like we were saying at the beginning, like the idea of, how do I talk to my kids about sex? Like maybe I have a very exciting sex life, or I've never felt weird about my own sexuality, and now I have children, and I have to at some point tell them about sex and make sure they're safe, and also like hopefully make sure that they get to have fulfilling sex lives.
Yeah.
How do you get there as a parent, and like with that shift in dynamic and the all the worries and concerns that come with it?
Totally.
But feeling again, like instilling good values and all the things that we want to do as parents.
Totally. Yeah. It's a big realm of work. I think firstly, people who are working on themselves and working on their own kind of narratives around sexuality for themselves and their life and their body are going to feel more confident then when it's time to talk to children. there's so many things. The first one I reckon is like, there's this age appropriate thing where it's like, when children ask you questions and they get to the point where they're asking questions, tell them the truth. Tell them the truth based on who you know them to be, what language you know is best for your child. I can't tell you how to talk to your child, right? You know your kid. Just like you know what to say to them when they fall over and hurt their knee, right? We don't have a problem with that. So imagine if you kind of took that same knowing and went, actually, I know my kid. I know what language is going to feel like safe and respectful and easy for them to understand. Use it. Just don't lie, because they know when you lie, you know. Mm-hmm. That's the first thing I'd say. Work on yourself. Don't tell lies. And there's this thing we attach to, which is like, for some reason, we want to protect children from sex. Right. Because we have this belief that sex is inherently bad or dirty or wrong or is going to damage them. Mm-hmm. That needs a look in. Like, what is your narrative around sex, and what on earth do you need to protect them from? Right. Actually, using language that is inclusive, age appropriate, and accurate, empowering is going to give them the tools to make them safe. Everybody, no one wants their child to feel like they are going to be abused or taken advantage of. But actually, when we don't prepare them with language and we don't create safe places for them to bring their curiosities, things like secrets are more likely to be, held. We perpetuate the gap and we perpetuate distance when we don't lean in and go, sweetheart, this is normal, this is natural, this is fun, this is safe, this is unsafe, these are the correct words for your genitals, etc.
Yeah. I remember learning when I was doing like some, anti-rape training, or not anti-rape training, but rape counsel. Like, it was anti-rape, but it was like for counseling for victims. And so they were talking about like teaching sex, like teaching children not to say like good touch, bad touch, but to like talk about, I can't remember now the language, okay touch and not okay touch. So that was it. Yeah. So like touch versus bad touch, because sometimes, if it our genitals are designed to feel good. So if you're saying touch, bad touch, that can be very confusing on a physiological level for a child. But explaining, and then the importance also of explaining the names of your genitals, as opposed to like, making up a name, like instead of saying vagina, you say teddy bear or whatever, something that like another adult may not understand what the child is trying to say or communicate, and lead to confusion when it comes to like preventing like sexual abuse. Yeah. So that's very important. And then the other side is something I think you kind of touched on briefly, but the idea that we're so afraid of our children getting hurt, specifically when it comes to sex, in a way that we're not afraid of them getting hurt when it comes to like anything else. Like, they're going to have friends, and friend relationships are going to end. They're going to get physically hurt doing things. They're going to lose at sports. They're not always going to be like getting perfect grades. They're not always going to be the best and the brightest in any given situation. So that this inherent disappointment in life. Yet, when it comes to sex, we're so afraid that they're going to have sex and get hurt because of sex. Yeah. And somehow that's different than anything else. Yeah. And it's because of all of the work that we haven't done to heal our narratives around what is sex positivity for you in your life. It's because we are transferring our shame and confusion and taboo and hiding, like we transfer it to our kids. And masturbation is a great example of that. It's like, you might remember moments where you got caught masturbating as a kid, like sometime under 10. And how did your parent or caregiver respond to you in that moment? All of the things that you took on, all of the beliefs and behaviors and habits that you took on, it's likely that however you react when you see one of your kids doing the same thing, you're going to just like pass that over. So it's about actually taking a step, like a stopping in that moment. It's like, what's actually happening here? Okay, it's innocent, natural, normal self-connection and pleasure in my child's body. Yeah. You stop. And instead of just, okay, what do I want to put here? I want to put, it's so beautiful,
You're obviously enjoying your body. I love you so much. I know, your body can be so much fun. Imagine that. Imagine putting love language there in replace of like shame and terror and like confusion, and don't do that and stop doing that.
Yeah. That's so powerful, I think, because again, like there's so many instances where that's your first interaction with anything that has to do with sexuality.
That's right. Yes, and your body. It's like body positivity and sex positivity collide in that moment, actually. It's like, it's yours. You're safe to do that. It's natural and normal. Kids are going to masturbate. And who are we to say don't do that, or yucky, or don't touch? Like, what? Don't do that.
Well, and it's like, I think it's ultimately like counter to what you actually want to do as a parent often, right? It's like you want your children to feel safe in their bodies. You want them to like themselves. You want them to like their bodies. You don't want them to like have negative associations. But yeah, masturbation is such a good example because it does freak us right out.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah. I'm wondering, so of course, like the answer is like work on yourself.
Yes.
But are there other like concrete, or maybe not concrete, but like other guideposts that you would give to parents who maybe haven't encountered this yet with a child, or it's starting to happen, or they're suspecting things are happening, and you're concerned about like, I want them to feel all these good things, but also the thought of my child masturbating or the thought of my child having a sexuality is really too much for me to handle. How else could you invite someone to explore that within?
I would say get your language. So as a good tool to help you get distance and decide who you want to be in those moments where you see those things happening, getting or when your 7-year-old says like, what's sex?
Mm-hmm.
If you've thought about what language you want to use before that moment comes, you're going to feel more confident in that moment. You're going to feel like, actually, there's a whole set of things that I definitely do want to say here, and I definitely don't want to say here because he's only 7, right? So this is the example because my son this happened just the other day. I have these like sex ed aids all around my house. Like they just sit around my bedroom. There's like dildos and pussy cushions and all sorts of things. And they just here in my environment. I have T-shirt, certified sex geek, whatever. And so does my partner. Like we just have this stuff around. And the 7-year-old's like, what's with you in sex? Like, what's sex? That's a bad word. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, who said it was a bad word? And he's like, well, one of the older boys at school, because they're out in community, they're out in society, and they're going to get a whole bunch of stuff. And so we had this conversation around going like, well, sex isn't a bad word, and this and this and this is why. And if you ever have any questions about sex, you can always ask me because that's what I do for a job. So I know like lots about it. So you can ask me anything, right? Obviously, this is not how you're going to respond because you're not all sex educators. However, my point is I had my language because I had thought about it before. Mm-hmm. So that's what I want you guys to do, to get your language right. What do I want to say? And write it down. Get clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. What else if you're like really kind of, is there someone else in the family that you could outsource the chat to? So if you yourself are really like, I do not have any of the tools for this, it makes me feel really uncomfortable. You might be dealing with your own, trauma or your own disharmony that you haven't yet started to heal. Who can you outsource it to? Is there a cousin or an auntie, someone that you really, really trust that you can speak to and have them with you in the conversation, or have them as part of the, do the conversation for you, potentially?
It's good advice. Yeah. Like the outsourcing, or, being like, oh, you should talk to so-and-so about this.
Yes.
Just like not ignoring it, not shutting them down, not lying to them, like avoid those things.
Yes.
Nothing else.
And put love there. When in doubt, just put love there in place of everything else,
That's like the best advice I think I've ever heard. When in doubt, just put love there. Mm-hmm. It's so good. I love it. Okay, hold on. I'm just checking to see if like anyone has asked a question. I don't think so. I just wanted to go check on that. No, I love that so much. It's so funny because like we have a very sex positive household, and so my partner and like me, clearly, obviously, like everything we're doing, we talk like sex and talking about body parts, and then my partner's ex, like his son's mother, also very sex positive. So at some point when his son like starts to ask more questions, we had this conversation at the dinner table once. It's like, well, Vienna has like a whole bunch of books in her office. You're like, yeah, you can always read them. And he was like, don't talk to me. But you know, it's there. It's there. Like if he wants to explore it, like there's really nothing that's off the table. But you know, we'll see what happens when that happens. I'm curious, is there anything else like before we like wrap up? Because I know you have limited time today, and thank you so much for sharing your time with us. Anything else you want to share with people? Like we're coming off of Valentine's Day, which is of course like a whole other conversation, but this idea, and especially given the times we live in, you know, sexuality can be complicated right now for a lot of different reasons, having to do with stress or like your ability or inability to see other humans. What else would you like people to take with them or consider, or something that you're chewing on right now when it comes to sexuality?
Yeah. I do feel like the stress is just playing a massive part in lots of people's bodies at the moment, you know, and I just want to say, like, go gently with each other. There are so many moments inside of my ups and downs where I will either feel wildly sexual or absolutely nothing at all. And all I have to remind myself in those moments is be gentle. This is all normal. Like what you're experiencing is all normal. Your nervous system, your brain is doing whatever it's doing its best, actually. It's doing an amazing job for you to take care of your body in the ways that it needs to be taken care of, you know? So I think with lots of people dealing with lots of different dynamics on the world scale, that's reflected in our bodies. It's reflected in our relationships. Go gentle, go easy. Your body's doing a great job. And I think communication is key and king in these situations. If you're experiencing a real gap in how you are and how you actually want to be, the first step is that you have to say something about that. You have to get it out of you. You have to write it down. Don't just live in your private hell kind of walled up. And I think the knowing that you're normal and your body's doing great will help you go, actually, this is pretty normal given everything that's happening. My body's doing great, so now I have the confidence to then say something about it. And from that place, change can come or a new perspective can come. But while we're beating ourselves up or going, oh, this is different, or oh, I'm broken, or oh, I better break up with my partner because I just, I haven't had sex with them for 3 months, just whoa.
I love that. Yeah, perfect. Thank you, Tamica. Tamica, right? I'm thinking right. Jesus.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Where can people, I'll post like your links, but if people want to work with you or want to find out more about what you do, where can they find you?
Yes. So come to Instagram at the Orgasmic Mama. You can also go to theorgasmicmama.com. And I can even post my email address with wherever you share this as well. Instagram is usually where people can write to me and email me. But yeah, like there are quite a few ways that you can engage with my stuff. Oh, also I might give you, if you want it, there's a free video series about confident communication in the bedroom that people can have.
That'd be great. Yeah, cool. That'd be lovely. I'm happy to link to that. Thank you so much, Tamica. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing. You're just a beautiful light and just brilliant, and it's so lovely to see you always. Well,
thank you. Thanks for having me. It's so great. I always like chatting to you. We'll do it again. You can come onto my podcast next.
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. Well, you enjoy the rest of your day because it's the morning where you are, and that's always the fun part about Australia is like it's in the future. Such a stupid joke, and I can't help it. Thank you so much. Everyone have a great rest of your day. I'm going to play us out.
Your cunt is special, there's so much to love. You and your pussy should fit like hand in glove. Whether it belongs to you or your lover, there is so much to discover. See you next time. The Clam Jam's got you covered. The Clam Jam.
That's so cool.